Okay, today we're going to learn about writing linear equations in standard form. So, our equation today that we are working with is ax plus by equals c. And this is kind of a helpful equation because it's going to allow you to see your x and y intercepts, which you can easily then sketch a graph. But as far as being able to look at this equation and see your slope and y-intercept, you can't do that with this equation. So you can see your slope from y equals mx plus b, your slope-intercept. You can see the slope in y minus the output value is equal to m times x minus the input value. That would be your point slope formula that we just learned about. But standard form, you'll notice that the x and y are on the same side of the equals, so the equal sign is not in between x and y, and then you have a constant that will be after the equal sign. So when you see that format, you need to be able to recognize it and know that I cannot look at x and mark the slope. That will not work, okay? Now, so it's really helpful to be able to use standard form. But if you want to see your slope, which is your m value, and your y-intercept, your b value, you are going to have to rearrange the equation and solve for b, which we talked about in Unit 1, and we're going to look at it more this unit, and then you're going to be using that skill throughout the remainder of Algebra 1. This format, standard form, also allows you to see your x and y-intercept. Now remember, for a y-intercept, your x value is 0, and for your x-intercept, your y value is going to be 0. So let's look at a couple of example problems, finding intercepts, and then we're going to work on rearranging the formula, the equation. All right, so to find your x-intercept, you just have to remember that y is 0. So I'm going to take my standard form equation, 2 times the value of x plus 3 times the value of y is equal to -6. And I am simply going to replace y with 0. So this is going back to function notation. So when I replace y with 0, I need to make sure that I put 0 in parentheses, or else it is going to look like 30 instead of 3 times the value of 0. Well, what is 3 times the value of 0? It is simply 0. So I really have 2 times the value of x is equal to -6. And now I'm going to divide by 2, and my x-intercept is equal to -3. So I know that my x-intercept point is at the point -3, 0. So now we're going to look at how do I figure out my y-intercept. Well, you have to remember that for your y-intercept, your x value is 0. So we're going to do the exact same thing, but instead of replacing y with 0, we're simply going to replace x with 0. And again, going back to function notation, I want to be able to put my 0 in parentheses so that it looks like 2 times the value of 0 and not 20. So that's where x would go. So we know that 2 times 0 is 0, so that will no longer be seen. So we really just have 3 times the value of y is equal to -6. And we're going to divide by 3 on both sides, and we're going to get y is equal to -2, which tells me that my y-intercept point is going to be at the point 0, -2. And now if I were to graph, which we are going to be looking at in the upcoming lessons, I know that I can go to the x-axis at -3 and the y-axis at -2 and make points, and then I can connect those points, and now I have a graph line just by using those 2 points. All right, let's look at the next one. We have -4 times the value of x minus 2 times the value of y is equal to -8. So again, for the x-intercept, we have to replace y with 0. So we're going to do -4 times x minus 2. When I get to y, I want to put empty parentheses. And then inside the parentheses, I'm going to put 0 for y. And again, any number times 0 is going to be 0. So this -2 times 0 piece is no longer going to be seen because it is going to simplify to 0. So I have -4x equals 8. And I'm going to divide by -4 on both sides. And x is equal to -2. So my x-intercept is at the point -2, 0. All right, for my y-intercept, again, I'm going to replace x with 0. So I'm going to go ahead and rewrite my standard form equation, but instead of writing x, I'm going to put empty parentheses because I am going to have to replace x with a value here in just a minute. All right, so now I've got to replace x with a value. We've got to remember, if we're looking for our y-intercept, x is really 0, so I'm going to put a 0 in here. And remember, you always want to use parentheses or else this would look like negative 40 instead of negative 4 times 0. All right, so I know that any number times 0 is going to be 0, so this term is going to cancel and disappear. And now I've got negative 2y is equal to negative 8. And I'm going to divide by negative 2. And now I'm going to have y is equal to, well, if I'm not sure about my division, especially since I'm using double fractions, I can type it in one of two ways. I can say negative 8 over negative 2. So I could type it in as a fraction. It's hard to see my calculator. And I got 4, or I could type it in using division. And you always type in numerator divided by denominator. So it's negative 8 divided by negative 2, which still gives me an answer of 4. So I know that y is 4. So my y-intercept point is going to be at the point 0, 4. Again, I can use these 2 points if I'm sketching a graph, and I can know that I can go to a point on the x-axis at negative 2. I can go to the y value at 4, make a point, and then I can connect. And now I've kind of got an idea of what the slope of my line is going to be based on the slant of my line between those 2 points. All right, let's look at the next one. So we've got 5 times the value of x minus 4y is equal to negative 12. Again, we're looking for x-intercept, so we're going to replace y with 0. So 5x minus 4, I'm going to put empty parentheses. And inside that parentheses, I'm going to put 0 for y. All right, and again, this is going to disappear because it's going to be 0, and I'm going to be left with 5 times the value of x is equal to 12. And I'm going to divide by 5 on both sides to solve for x. And x is equal to 12/5, or 12 over 5. But I'm going to simplify this ratio in my calculator to see if it simplifies to anything else. And I notice that I get back 12/5, which tells me that my ratio is already simplified. And yes, your x-intercept can be a fraction. It can be a decimal. 12/5, if I wanted to see what that decimal value is, I simply hit math and I select option 2 for decimal. That is really 2.4. It can cross the x-axis at 2.4 because remember, my graph line can cross anywhere on the x-axis, and 2.4 is a number on the x-axis. So your x-intercept does not always have to be a whole number. All right, so my point is going to be 12/5. I'm going to go ahead and write it as the fraction just because of space. 0. But if I saw 2.4 comma 0, that would be the same ordered pair. All right, let's look at the next y-intercept. So again, for y-intercept, we're going to replace x with 0. So where x is, I'm going to put empty parentheses, and then I'm going to come back in and fill in my value for x equals negative 12. And what's our value for x? We know that it is a 0. All right, well again, any number times 0 is 0, so I am left with negative 4y is equal to a negative 12. And I'm going to divide by a negative 4. Don't leave off that negative sign. If you leave off the negative sign, your intercept is going to be off by a sign. And I get y is equal to 3, which tells me that my ordered pair is 0, 3. So my graph line crosses the x-axis at about 2.4, crosses the y-axis at positive 3, and now I can, if I was sketching a graph again, we could connect those points and we could get an idea about what we should expect from our slope as far as the sign of it, not its actual value. All right, last one. So we've got negative 2 times the value of x plus 7y is equal to 11. So I want to find the x-intercept, so I'm going to replace y with 0. And my y is 0. And I know that any number times 0 is 0. So I'm going to have negative 2x is equal to 11. And I'm going to divide by negative 2. And x is equal to, since I'm having 2 does not divide in evenly into 11, I'm going to type in this ratio. So I've got negative, no I don't. I have 11 over negative 2. And I get the same ratio back, which tells me that my ratio does not simplify. So I've got negative 11 over 2. Again, if I wanted to see what this is as a decimal, to see kind of where it crosses, all I have to do is hit math and I have to hit 2 for decimal and hit enter, and it crosses at -5.5. So I have an idea of where that graph line is going to cross the x-axis. But again, for space, I'm going to write this as a -11/2, comma 0, and then I know what my x-intercept point is. All right, let's go ahead and finish up and find the y-intercept. So I'm going to replace x with 0. And we know that any number times 0 is 0, so I'm just going to be left with 7y equals 11. And I'm going to divide by 7. So y is equal to 11/7. So I'm going to type in my ratio, 11/7, and I get 11/7 back, so that tells me my ratio does not simplify. But again, if I want to get a better idea of what this actual number is on a number line, I'm just going to hit math, hit option 2 and enter, and it's about 1.57. Now you can see this decimal keeps going, and it has more place values. So if I was going to say 1.6 or 1.57, I would actually be rounding this number. So the more accurate answer is 11/7, but I now have an idea about where that graph point is going to be on the y-axis. It's somewhere between 1 and 2, but closer to 2. But again, I'm going to write it as the fraction 11/7, 11/7, and there is my y-intercept point. And in the next video you watch, you will see how to rearrange it from standard to slope-intercept form.